Good morning, Cosmic Wavers. How's everyone this morning? Are we all ready to raise the love light frequency? Yeah. All right. Ready to ride the cosmic wave. We are so honored and privileged to have my dear friend Brad Olsen as our keynote speaker. He is such a powerful speaker and incredibly well-versed on such a wide diversity of topics. And today he's going to talk about future esoterics. Let's welcome Brad Olsen.
Yeah. All right, folks, real quick, a brief bio on our keynote speaker, Brad Olsen. Brad Olsen is the author of 9 books, including 2 in his esoteric series, Modern Esoteric and Future Esoteric, an award-winning author, book publisher, and event producer. His keynote presentations and interviews have enlightened audiences at Contact in the Desert, Awareness Life Expo, the 5D events, and dozens of radio shows including Coast to Coast, Ground Zero, and Fade to Black, and television shows including my personal favorite, Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, and Mysteries of the Outdoors. In August 2017, Brad Olsen started hosting his own syndicated radio show called The Esoteric Circle. Brad is the founder and co-producer of the How Weird Street Fair in the Soma neighborhood of his home base in San Francisco, California. Brad was featured on the front page of San Francisco Bay Guardian in September 2014. The Chicago native's esoteric writing continues to reach a wide audience while it continues breaking ground in the alternative journalism, public speaking, illustration, and photography. Folks, your keynote speaker at the Cosmic Wave Conference. Put your hands together for Brad Olsen.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Suzanne, for putting on this great event, giving me the opportunity to talk to you all. This is how I got into these subjects. This was actually the first presentation I did outside of being a travel writer, which I did for 15 years. I have some books over there to show you of my early experience doing sacred places. And of course, I've been here in Sedona many, many times working on the Sacred Places book. Of course, we have the vortexes here that we all know of, very famous site with earth energy emanating through. And at this conference, I'm now understanding that this is going to be the first city of light, the Crystal City. This is where it's all going to start to happen. And indeed, we have ships that are above. We saw one last night. We filmed this blue orb from Suzanne's porch, and it's amazing. I did a conference up at the ECETI Ranch earlier this year in August, right after the solar eclipse, and that's James Gilliland's ranch in Washington State. And I have to say, when you see these lights with your own eyes, doing all kinds of movements and going into this crater region of Mount Adams, and like we saw last night, you really have to start saying there is something major going on here. And as I said on the panel last night, yesterday, the Chinese proverb, may you be blessed to live in interesting times. And it really can't get any more interesting than this, because we are living in the age of the great unveiling. This is when it's all going to start coming out. And those of us who are on the cusp of understanding these subjects, we're actually in a very good position to be those who articulate this to everybody else. And while these crowds may be in the 50 or 100 today, I envision in just a few short years, this could be auditorium-sized crowds. And maybe we're going to enlist all of you to help get this message out. Because if indeed Sedona becomes this crystalline city, this is a very special place. I think we all know that to begin with. But if this is where the disclosure movement has its HQ, then this is going to be one amazing journey to be on, living here in Sedona and seeing it all happen. As John mentioned, I'm out of San Francisco. We have Silicon Valley right there. A lot of amazing things are happening with technology. The whole concept of Moore's Law, that technology grows exponentially every 18 months. That's like nothing. blink of an eye. And we said on the panel, it seems like time is speeding up. So we're getting this change, it's just coming in, and so many things that are happening to us personally. As Joseph said yesterday, we're getting the heat flashes and the buzzing in our ears, and the frequencies are coming in, and we're just changing as human beings right before our very eyes. So it's a wonderful time to be alive. Some of the stuff I'm going to talk about may be a little bit disturbing, like how this all went into the black world of hidden projects and how this stuff stays bottled up in some of these projects. But we absolutely have to know about this information. And as Suzanne mentioned in her talk yesterday, stuff with the pedophiles and the children networks, it's disturbing, it's hard to digest, but it's the world we live in. And again, as I said, we are on the cusp of understanding these subjects. So this is the book, Future Esoteric. This is what I'm basing this talk on. I came out with this book right in December 2012, like right on the beginning point of the changes. Now here we are a couple years later, but as you'll see, the information is still very relevant. Esoteric just basically means subjects that are known by a select few. That basically, it's almost like hoarded information. If I could just read the actual definition right out of the dictionary. It is those subjects that a kind of information that's understood by or followed by a select few who have access to special knowledge. And esoteric study was the impetus behind the origin of the mystery schools in ancient Greece. It seems like we don't have anything like that in this modern age, but maybe we do. Maybe this is the new mystery school. Maybe we are the adepts who are the first ones to really grok this information. So let's go to the next slide. Get started here. Hit it again. No matter what the question, hit it again. Love is always the answer. I think I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys already know this. As dark as some of this subject matter can be, if you just keep this in mind, you'll always be on the straight track. And this information then is something that I want you to be skeptical about. I want you to question everything I say, because really we're our own researchers. And when you use this esoteric information, you're using it in such a way that you're looking for data points of your own. Let's just say we're all researchers. We're all in this field of codifying and understanding these esoteric subjects. So this is what I'm saying. I can only show you the door. It's really up to all of us to walk right through it. And what we see is the new dawn of AI coming into our world. This is something we got to start to understand. High technology, free energy. I mean, it's really a double-edged sword. There's some things that can be incredible for the benefit of humanity, and other things that could very much enslave us. Do we dare click the next slide? And this is what I'm saying about the collecting the multiple data points. I did kind of go through this, so let's go to the next one. We're holding our breath here. And hit it again. So here we are. This is the blue pill. This is the red pill. You have a choice. Hidden truth or deception. What's it going to be? Okay. Now, maybe the screen could come, the projector, this is the very top part.
It's the...
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's the presentation.
Okay, well,
The screen has all.
Yeah, I noticed the font's a little screwed up. So.
Yeah.
All right, we're just rolling with it. We're going to get through this. But I want you to know that this is really not a presentation about conspiracy theories. It's rather what we know is a global plan and a very clear agenda, however covertly, and we're here to basically take a peek on the other side. And as I said, I want you guys to all be skeptical about this stuff. Because when you look at the motives here, and there are a lot, and you also consider the ET motives, and this is called exopolitics. What are their motives for being involved in this planet? What are our motives to have an exchange with them? And I know Thea has a few ideas on that, and Kashtara, and some of you that I know are very interested in this subject and have very vital information on this subject. And this is why these conferences are so great, because it brings us all together and it's a sharing of information. Let's go to the next. All right, now we're in the secret state, and this is where things started to go awry. The day after Roswell, because in this age of information, ignorance is a choice, and we all have a choice, whether we wish to wake up and discover these hidden truths and put it together in our own mind, what's really going on here, or go back to sleep. We have what is called free will. I know you've all heard this. And this is very important because this also ties into the ET agenda, and that is, we all have the opportunity to declare our own sovereignty, not only on a personal level, but on a global level. And as I said, this is a very important time right now that we have this opportunity to make this choice. Because if we stay asleep, it is our free will not to learn this stuff, not to care, just to dismiss it all. But if we make the choice to really understand it and share it, I think there are great rewards in such a motive, even though there is danger as well. There are definitely forces that do not want this information out. They do not want their core secrets to be known. And let's go to the next one. Because the first casualty of war is truth. Heard of this guy, Sun Tzu. He wrote the book called The Art of War. And he said all warfare is based on deception. There's that word again, deception. Similarly, the Israeli Mossad motto is, by way of deception thou shalt do war. Get it again. The truth is about
I thought you said it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
False flag operations, which I touched on 9/11, starting wars, and there are more reasons than just to accumulate resources. It is also to keep this planet in a state of fear. It is also to keep us angry and paranoid and not trusting each other. Why? Because this feeds into the Archon network. This is kind of the deepest side of some of this that we're going to go. This is like fourth dimensional stuff, the realm of angels and demons, as Suzanne brought up, and we've been talking about a lot lately. But it's very important to understand, because what it's all about is keeping us isolated from each other, keeping us divided. As long as we can be divided, remember the old saying, divide and conquer is another tactic of warfare that's been around forever. As long as you can keep them divided, you can keep them not seeking this kind of information. Let's go to the next. And we have to know that part of the disinformation used by the Anglo-American moneyed elite is used in order to influence and manipulate the government officials all the way down to the military, police. Yeah, some people are getting rich. By far, this is where most of us are. Remember, this is in the 19th century. This cartoon came out. So they were already understanding that there is a hierarchy. And the hierarchy is really important to understand, because this is the way our institutions work on this planet. Look at everything. From the Vatican, you got the Pope. Look at government, you got a president. Look at educational institutions, you have the president of a university. Look at corporations, you got CEOs. Everything in this country, in this world, is based on a hierarchy, and it's designed that way for the purposes of control. And here you have, what's it all about? Oh, the almighty dollar. Who's controlling it? The very rich and the royalty. By divine right to rule, they always say, that they have been appointed that way. Below them are the clergy. They're also high on the hierarchy. Who protects all that? The military. Yes, some people are getting rich if you play along with it, but by far most of us are down below. Let's go to the next. So glad it's working. Okay, one of the chapters in Future Esoteric is called Media Manipulation. And this is very important to understand how perspective is everything, especially when the media feeds us their information. You know how there's a war. There is a war going on right now for the media. Why? Because it's a war for your mind. They want to shape perception. And here's the kicker. It's not about money. It's not about control. It's about the narrative. Okay? What is the narrative? It's the storyline that we all believe this is our reality. And if that narrative somehow gets hijacked, well, they do it all the time. But if we were to say, it's a different narrative, and we all start to understand that, and then again, you don't go back once you start to really understand how this all works. And the media can manipulate our viewpoint. They do it all the time. And as I often say, just remember, what's not being said also speaks volumes. And what I mean by that is what is edited out is also probably what they don't want you to know. Okay? So there are ways to frame the photo to make it look like, one, the guy's getting killed, two, he's getting helped. The real situation might be none of the above or just being helped. Let's go to the next one. So we're going to get into a little bit of UFOs and where this information came from. History will someday show that the very first prototypes were created by the Germans. And as Hermann Oberth said, when asked how they came up with such spectacular designs using zero-point energy, free energy, and anti-gravity crafts, Hermann Oberth said, we had help from our friends above. Okay? So they're giving hints. Even Werner von Braun, our father of rocket science, he was an SS officer. I have a picture of him in Future Esoteric, fully dressed up in his Third Reich regalia. Well, why is this important? Because they were the first to do it. And I think in history, we're really to tell the picture. We might be looking at the Nazis being the first humans on the moon back in the 1930s. It goes back that far. So we're coming on close to the 100-year anniversary of the real space travel on this planet of humans. Now, we can go back to antediluvian times, and in my other book, Modern Esoteric, I talk about the lost continents and the high civilizations that were once on this planet, and the Vimana crafts of India and high technology that was here. So in this context, we're talking about the modern age, projecting forward into the future. So here are some blueprints that basically were discovered by the Allies and Russia. We're going to talk about Russia's involvement in UFOs here in a little bit. But why this is very important is because now we see the blueprints, and believe me, there are a lot more than this, and photos. Let's go to the next. This may or may not be a real photo. Let's just consider it as a place mark. But the Nazis were most certainly involved with the occult and with the greeting of ETs and getting their help. And again, Hermann Oberth and others saying we got help from our other visitors. Now, one thing about ETs is everybody says, oh, they're coming from up there, or they're coming from so far away. They're extraterrestrials, extra out of our Earth atmosphere. What about interterrestrials? What about right here on Earth? What about in the underground bases, their own bases? Some of them going way, way back. We're going to talk about underground bases. Let's go to the next. So here's a couple of our boys. There's Hermann Oberth, Werner von Braun. How many of you have heard of Operation Paperclip? Almost everybody. Yeah, see. No surprises here. Okay, well, what it was they didn't really lose. They moved to America. They were brought here. A lot of these guys, not necessarily the rocket scientists, but some other high-ranking officials should have been in Nuremberg, should have been on trial, should have been spending the rest of their lives in jail. Instead, they get new identities, new passports, and very high-ranking roles. And this was also the start of the Cold War, which was probably inflamed by the Nazis trying to turn us against the Soviets, who they so much hated because basically the Soviet Union crushed the Third Reich in the war. But what we have in this country when they came over here is the Fourth Reich. The Fourth Reich in America. And this is when things really started to go awry in this country. Because not only did they come over with the scientists and the know-how and the technology to start NASA, but also get involved in the secret space program. And that is very much a reality and has been for decades. So when I was on Coast to Coast the first time, I was talking with George Knapp, famous reporter out of Las Vegas. He broke the Bob Lazar story. And we were talking about this guy named Ben Rich, who came out of the Skunk Works. And I'm just quoting some things from what Ben Rich says. This is in the late 80s, keep in mind. Can you imagine what they have today? And Ben Rich is saying in the late 80s, we have the technology to take ET home. What you can imagine in your greatest dreams, we already have. And he's saying this on his deathbed. He said, I really didn't want to say anything. I was going to die with these secrets, but then I realized this technology in the wrong hands could very well be a very dangerous thing to have. And so I'm talking to George Knapp, and he's like, oh yeah, I met Ben Rich. I interviewed him. I'm like, you're asking me questions? I mean, you should be the one giving this information out. And he did. He's great. So the Nazis didn't lose. They moved to America. They not only brought in the rocket scientists, look at it, all these guys from the Third Reich. Russia got a bunch of them, and the UK got a bunch of them. But we also have Reinhard Gehlen, who came and started the CIA. And herein lies the problem. This is when it all starts going awry. It was the OSS, and then it became the CIA in 47, same year as Roswell. I think it would be a great book to do a real esoteric expose on that year of 47. So many things happened, as well as the excursion down to Antarctica, when they were going after some kind of underground hidden base in Antarctica, and we'll talk about that. But you also have, coming over with these Nazis, MK Ultra. Do you know why it's spelled MK? It's the German spelling. K is spelled control in Germany. This is mind control scientists that came here under Project Paperclip, and this is part of the infiltration in our media, as well as the mass consciousness, to create this narrative that we all think is our reality, but in fact it's not. CIA's calling. Let's go to the next one. They wonder where we're at in the presentation. Yeah, we just mentioned it. So what we have here is, after World War II, we have the rise of the think tanks. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Bilderberg Group. Yep. Started by an ex-SS officer, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. And in fact, the very first Bilderberg meeting was in the 1950s, right here in Little Holland, at the Bilderberg Hotel. That's where it got its name. And it's this group that gathers every year, and they make decisions behind closed doors. Okay, we hear a lot of Russian collusion, right? And they're going to try to pin Russian collusion on this very little-known article called the Logan Act. It's never been enforced, but I'll tell you, it sure could be at the Bilderberg Conference. And what it is nobody from private industry is allowed to make deals with anybody from government behind closed doors. That's the Logan Act. It's been on the law for a long time, a couple centuries. It's never been enforced. And we're going to talk about Bohemian Grove a little bit. There you go. We want to start enforcing the Logan Act. Boy, can I tell you where to start looking. And one of them is the Bilderberg Group. You also have the Trilateral Commission. Joseph talked about this, the Council of 300. which is basically the center and all these think tanks around it, Council on Foreign Relations in this country. These are some topics I'm going to come up with in my next book, expanding on this, because it's so very important, and how the USA became a corporation in 1871. A lot of people don't know that. That's why your name is in caps on your birth certificate and your driver's license. You are basically a commodity, and a lot of people don't know this. You're basically owned by the government. You're bought and sold on the New York Stock Exchange as such. So when people understand this, this is, again, one of the core secrets. You can start doing things to reverse it. And I know Matthew does a lot about being a sovereign citizen and reversing this course. And it can be done. But it is fraught with some dangers and difficulties. But if you want to know more about it, I think Matthew would be the source to talk about afterwards. Let's go to the next one. And in this country, we have the rise of the first billionaires. Here is John D. Rockefeller, the first billionaire. This is even before income tax, before antitrust laws, which broke up his Standard Oil into a dozen oil companies, which were still owned by Rockefeller. We just helped him out. We just gave him 12 companies out of one. That didn't really work out so well. So here, the point of this is that when these tycoons amass their power, they're not going to let it go. In fact, they're going to use it in such ways that they can get into a whole bunch of other industries. And if you know, the Rockefeller Foundation is an underwriter of the PBS NewsHour. So do you think we're going to really get unbiased information when their underwriter is the Rockefellers? And then the science program, which the PBS is about the only thing you can even watch anymore on TV. But you can see right through it, when the Koch brothers sponsor their science show called Nova, you think they're ever going to talk about free energy? The Koch brothers are into coal. So they talk about clean coal. Yeah, right. Had we gone on the course of free energy 100 years ago with Tesla, and I'll get to that, can you imagine how different this world would be today? Can you imagine? Let's go to the next one. And then we have things like HARP technology. Remember, we're still in the secret section, so I'm just giving you an overview of who is calling the shots, who is the secret government, who is the deep state, and what are the tools at their disposal. And in my opinion, one of the most dangerous tools they have is this. What is that? Oh, well, they say it's to study the aurora borealis. No, it's actually not. It's a microwave. It's like a microwave oven that can be directed into the sky. If you guys are watching the sky this morning, they're spraying chemtrails. It interacts with the chemtrails. You see, for the very first time since they started spraying and using HARP, our atmosphere is conductive. It is conductive in a neutral point of way when you get lightning, storms, but now with all these particles, especially metallic particles, they can use it to be conductive in different ways. And one of those ways, using HARP, is to focus microwave heated energy, these great heaters, and move it around and steer the weather. So guess what? Humans are now playing God on this planet. And if that's not one of the scariest things that I'm going to talk about, I don't know what is. So I think people absolutely have to understand that the weather is being controlled. The skies are being sprayed. We're not being told the truth about this. Every once in a while, I'll be in a bathroom in an airport next to me, taking a leak as a pilot, and I'm like, hey, what's up with all those lines in the sky? They won't say nothing. They have gag orders. Same thing with newscasters, weathermen. They'll never tell you the truth. And I live out in San Francisco. On sunny days, I like to go down to Baker Beach, just real close to where I live, play some volleyball and run around. And you literally see them come in with the tankers, lay the lines down, and create clouds. So I go in and see what the weather's like on the news, and they'll say, oh, these light wispy clouds blew in today. No, they didn't. They were sprayed. You can see it with your own eyes. And one of the arguments I do, and I spoke at the Chemtrail Symposium in San Francisco this year, is we can all be our own scientists using the scientific method, because what is a scientific method? Number one, you're using observation. It's the first law of the scientific method is observation. So you're doing it yourself. And now I'm sharing my findings with you guys. You say, you know what, I saw the same thing. We saw those lines, we saw this cloud being created, and what they're being told to us makes no sense. Why? They've hijacked the narrative. They use it for their control. They don't want us to talk about HAARP steering this stuff around. And if you've seen the hurricanes this year, very suspect. The intensity, the power of these things. But as I have been informed, their intensity has been dampered down a bit. They could have been much, much worse. As well as some of the false flags, such as Vegas, could have been much, much worse. They're starting to get resistance, and that's a good thing. We want to rise up and have some of the white hats start making a difference here. So here's our HAARP technology. Potentially can trigger floods, droughts, hurricanes, earthquakes, as well as triggering volcanoes, which they're trying to do in Yellowstone, the biggest caldera in North America. And they're not able to do it because there are service to other ETs that can counter it. But HAARP can also be used as a weapon system and used against our enemies. Go to the next one. And as such, if we have a perceived enemy and we want to launch some weather warfare against them, we can. But you see, Russia does it too. China sprays their sky too. So it's a bit of a dangerous game to use it against these countries because they can turn around and use it against us. But what happens in the world of free will, if we use it against ourselves, then Russia and China aren't going to object. They really can't say anything about it. But another threat to peace is outer space, is the advanced spacecraft of these black operations. These advanced flying machines have high-tech weapons as well. These were also developed by the Nazis. There are some photos that show some of the weapons underneath their early flying craft. Has anybody ever heard of the Battle of Kursk? I think I'm saying it right. It's right outside of Moscow. It was the biggest tank battle ever fought in World War II. And there were Nazi UFOs involved in that fight. Very little known tidbit of World War history, World War II history. But then after World War II, when the Nazis came over here, we started building this stuff ourselves. And what they say in when they're watching for UFOs out of Fort Cheyenne Mountain, where they keep tabs on this stuff, is it ours or theirs? And most of the time, now the sightings, maybe not around here, but in the rest of the country, are ours. And John, Eric, and I were out at Area 51 a couple months ago. But I understand a lot of the testing has then since moved to Utah, to Dugway, where they're doing a lot of the testing. But nonetheless, seeing something like that when you're driving by would be quite a shock. You may or may not want to get out and take a picture. I don't know how brave you are. But all this stuff, including chemtrails, remains under the cloak of national security. So people can't understand why this stuff isn't getting out, because it is these core secrets. It's what the government, it's not even really the government. It's not the USA government that we know so well anymore. It is a secret government. It is a shadow government that controls this deep state. Okay, let's go to the next. Here's a little glimpse of what the underground base may look like in Antarctica. And this is what Admiral Byrd was going to root out in 1946-47. He was on a 6-month military expedition with dozens of ships, aircraft. They're coming up to this region in what is today Queen Maud Land. I have a map of it in future esoteric. And right before they got to this region, they were met with advanced craft. which sunk one of the ships. It's called the USS Murdoch, which is still underneath the waves in Antarctica. Wouldn't it be great to do an expedition to recover that, just like they did with the Titanic? It can totally be done. And by the way, the Titanic, a couple interesting things about false flags. We've all been told it hit an iceberg, right? Well, when they put that underwater probe down there, they found that the hull did this instead of concave like it hit an iceberg. Well, what does that? An explosion. Titanic was sunk intentionally. Why? Because some of the main opponents for the Federal Reserve System were on that ship. And they were going to have a discussion with J.P. Morgan, who canceled at the last second. And that ship was not even the Titanic. It was the Olympia. And you can even see in that, there's a great documentary. I recommend you all check it out if you're interested in this, where they examine the footage from some of those underwater probes. And you can actually see a couple of the letters of Olympia on the Titanic. And then they switched names. And that ship had been damaged. So they wanted to get rid of it anyways. And they got the insurance on it, and just like the Twin Towers, got fabulously rich off of a setup, a false flag. So this stuff's been going on for hundreds of years, over 100 years, and as well as these underground bases. So the ones that the Nazis discovered, and I'm going to go into it more in my third book, Beyond Esoteric. You guys got a sneak peek of those chapters. I'm going to get into it because I found some maps that the Nazis created of this region called the Schumacher Ponds. And they took their U-boats in these under ice journeys along rivers that were not frozen. And they got to this region where there are hot springs in Antarctica that create these domes. And what they found in there, again, could be great story, and some of this is starting to come out. Advanced technology, ETs, giants. Now I do a talk on the giants, and this is how I end it, is in Antarctica, because what they're finding down there is incredible, including motherships that are 3 miles across. So this is a game changer. This could really change our whole perception of the world. So when the Nazis discovered it, could you imagine being a part of the first exploratory party pre-World War II? This is in the 1930s when they claimed this land, and they called it New Schwabenland. Today it's called Queen Maud Land. And they claimed it for the Third Reich. And one of the admirals, his name was Admiral Dolens, he went on record as saying that we have created an impregnable fortress for the Fuhrer in Antarctica. And now, just with the recent JFK data dumps, is also a whole bunch of information that Hitler did not die after World War II. In fact, he was shepherded off, probably first to the underground bases in Antarctica, but lived his natural life out in South America. And there are regions of the Patagonia region in Antarctica that are very Germanic and had supported the Nazis pre-World War II. So they had set it up, and then Martin Bormann, the money man, he also escaped with bullion, tons of bullions of gold, much wealth, even priceless artifacts that were looted in Europe have not been recovered, and could very well be still kept down in Antarctica. And isn't it interesting? Germany's like the richest country in Europe. Virtually no debt. Germany's calling the shots. Germany had support from the outside. German companies rose from the ashes like the phoenix and became very, very powerful. Let's go to the next. And this is how they want you to think. This is the narrative they want you to do. Remember right after 9/11, keep shopping. You know, make America great. Go out and keep shopping. That's their narrative, but we know better than that. Let's go to the next. Because the revolution is consciousness. We want to make the change. We have to change people's minds. We have to change the way they think. We have to change the knowledge that is known by everyday people. Because consider, what we're being told is probably just this tiny little dot. What's known by, say, the police department, let's use the example of the Vegas shooting, is a bigger circle. They're getting their orders from a secret government. That's a bigger circle around it. And then the biggest circle around that are the real controllers who are calling the shots. Even as unlikely as some of these stories are, they purport them. Let's go to the next. Okay, so now we're going to go into the Cosmos section. This is when it starts getting interesting. This crowd will probably be able to grok some of these subjects pretty easily. Look at this picture, though. I love this picture. This is in this, I'll get the name of it. It is the Simius 147, or the Spaghetti Nebula, also called Sharpless 2240, which is a large supernova remnant in the constellation of Taurus. But look at how it looks like a brain. As above, so below. This is something Joseph brought up too. So many things on a grand scale could also be on the micro scale. Let's go to the next. So let's consider seriously the reason why the elite and their institutions are not discussed in the mainstream media, just like the Bilderbergers. Even heads of media companies go to these Bilderberg meetings. They don't report about it in the New York Times the next day. They don't say what's being said, and their bosses are all there. But what does happen is the next week, usually after the Bilderberg meeting, is the G8 meeting. And then after that, which is a public event reported on, they start laying out all the policy. But in the case of some of the most interesting bits of science, including the potential for black holes and how space travel is really done in a very short amount of time, not traveling at the speed of light, but even quicker, that may be something that they don't want us to know in the regular narrative. And isn't it funny that we know more about things like Charlie Sheen's sex life or the slow mental decline of Lindsay Lohan than we do about these kind of subjects? Let's go to the next one. Can we get this to work? This is a little video.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Let's see if this goes. This is really cool. So there's a really interesting story that after the... No? Shoot.
You and I had this problem yesterday. I had to play it directly from the video and it wouldn't play through the
Well, I'll describe it. It basically shows some groups of gray aliens, the classic big heads, and this one in particular that was kept by the Soviets they called him Skinny Bob. And they have videos of him here. What happened was when the Soviet Union collapsed in 89, starting in 89, but more accelerated in the early 90s, if you came in there with hard cash to Moscow, you could go into the KGB headquarters and walk out with films like this, and that's where it came from. You can see it. Maybe if you guys want to see it on my computer, I can show it to you afterward. And things like the Soviet Union had their own Roswell crash, but even better filmed, like from multiple angles. And they also had their own alien autopsy video, which has been leaked. So if you went in to Moscow in 1990 with a bunch of cash, you could get someone to come out of the KGB and say, here you go, take your money. So in many ways, Russia is way ahead of us as far as disclosure, and they may be on the forefront of disclosing. But you see, they're also using this technology as well. So in many ways, they have an interest to keep it secret. Let's go to the next. We'll have to, maybe I'll show that later. Yeah, and then we got the Santilli video. Remember this one? This was one of ours. This was a leaked autopsy video. Incredible if you see the whole thing. This creature had 6 fingers, which does correspond with the control panel from the Roswell crash. They have hand panels that they control the ship from. They have a headband, and their suit is incorporated in the body. That's why a lot of, in the early years, UFO researchers were so confused, because the pilot seat didn't have a big window for the pilot to fly these from, but indeed, they're flying them with their minds. And this is what we're working on to do this too. So this is one of the guys who came out of one of the crashes. May not be Roswell, it could be Aztec, it could be Kingman, Arizona. There were a lot of crashes around this area in the late 40s, early 50s. And they cut this guy open, they pull out his brain. Boy, if somebody's going to fake this, they would have had to put millions of dollars into it. And I always say, well, what if? What if it is a real alien? You know, again, it's a game changer, and that's why you get a lot of people that are upset about this information. But it had no navel. So the other major discovery of this alien autopsy video, the Greys are not born naturally. They don't have a belly button. They don't come out of a mother. They're all test tube created. They're all synthetic life forms. The reptilians are natural born, but these guys usually aren't. When you see how many similarities there are to Earthlings, this guy is probably a hybrid. And the hybrids are being made here. And there's a lot of talk that all the Greys are really from our future coming back using time travel, because this is such an important time to them too, to use our DNA, to infuse it in their own, because they are a dying race. When you do test tube, we all know through cloning, farmers will tell you this too, you can only clone so long before the plant loses its potency and it's not effective or won't grow or won't live anymore. So they need our DNA. This is exopolitics. These are some of the reasons why they're here. They need us, but they don't really value us or treat us right. And that's got to change. Let's go to the next. Because when we do start to understand the reptilians, oh, you think I'm tall. They might be up towards the ceiling, tall and strong. Oh boy, are they. But they have the ability to transition into the fourth dimension. Boy, we could do a whole talk. Maybe I'll do this one day. About what the fourth dimension is and how some of these entities are able to basically walk through walls. You can do that if you're a fourth dimensional entity. If you have that power, you can shapeshift. We've all heard that. And even some humans, we were talking about this at dinner last night, up to 20% reptilians. And I got some news for you. We're all a little bit reptilian. We have it right here in the back of our brain. It's the reptilian brain. It's the flight or fight mechanism. It's our survival technique. But there's different variations. Some of us may only be 2 or 3 or 4%. Actually, the purest of all are the Rh negative types. And this is in my family. And there's a lot of weird things about Rh negative blood. My uncle Douglas died at 5 days old because his blood interacted with my grandmother's. He was Rh positive, like my grandfather. My grandmother was Rh negative, and she killed her own offspring. What makes this so astonishing, it happens in no other animals. It's only humans. So just as the African giraffe has recently been divided into 4 subspecies, the humans are going to have to be divided into many subspecies. We're a bunch of different humans with different traits, and when you open the hood and tinker with our DNA, you're going to start seeing how different we are. Now, we can mate with each other, just like a donkey and a horse can mate and have a mule as an offspring. It can be done. It's not to say that we're not all that dissimilar, that we can't still have traits that are similar, but I think when we really get into the DNA, and Joseph also touched upon the dark DNA, we really start to understand who we really are. We're going to start seeing that we do have a little bit of this guy in us. And this goes all the way back to the creation of the human race. And part of the plan was to encode us with some of the reptilian DNA. They consider themselves the progenitors of this planet. My good friend Len Kasten just wrote a book called Alien World Order, and it's all about how the reptilians basically terraformed and planted the animals, the flora, the fauna, and created humans. That we are a product of genetic engineering. And this is something that's also going to be very difficult for most people to comprehend and digest, but sooner or later, this will have to come out. Let's go to the next. And we've all heard about the abduction scenario and the cattle mutilations. I have a chapter of that in Future Esoteric as well. Another very dark subject, but we have to understand this. They have the technology to tractor beam people up. And nowadays, they're not dropping the dead cattle back in the farmland or the ranch land where they came from, but taking them to cordoned off areas in national parks. And I got this from Corey Goode himself, being interviewed by Linda Moulton Howe at Contact in the Desert, that many national parks, especially the big ones out here in the West, have no-go areas. No humans can go there. There's a very famous one right here in the Grand Canyon, and where they found Egyptian relics and names like the Isis Mesa and the Osiris Dome and names like that. You can't go there. You cannot go there. And now what they're doing, according to Corey Goode, is when an abduction victim dies or cattle mutilation, there's just too much notoriety to just throw those back where they came from, but to drop them in these special zones. I'll tell you this about Corey Goode, and I was sitting face to face with him for 90 minutes. Either he is one of the best actors on the planet, who can visibly start shaking and close to shedding tears and showing anxiety and making his face go red. And he says, I'm not proud of this, but I was in some of these programs where I saw abducted humans. And again, is it ours or theirs? He says it's mostly ours, that the My Labs are doing most of the abducting these days. And he said he was in situations where there was a freshly abducted human. It's like, please, get me out of here, help me. And he couldn't do anything. And he feels terrible about that, and who wouldn't? But at least he's coming clean and speaking his truth. Let's go to the next. And then what happens in these abductions? Well, most of them, especially the early ages, with females, is they did feel like they were touched, violated, impregnated. This is how the hybrids are created. They are artificially inseminated. The fetus is allowed to grow, I understand, to 3 months. A lot of these abductees are chipped and tagged so they know where these people are at all times. They usually come in the middle of the night. They'll take them after 3 months, take that fetus at 3 months, and then put it in a test tube. This is how the hybrids are being made. In underground bases and also in some ships. Now, a lot of this is being shut down right now. Ever since 9/11, there was a big shift. My friend Gordon Ashtar has said that the Galactic Federation had made a decision after 9/11 that humans could get out of control with this technology and could become a big menace to the universe. So they have decided, and it was a very narrow vote, some of the galactic councils, that we have to intercede in Earth. They're going to become a major menace controlled by the reptilians in a few hundred years from now. We want them to be a Star Trek civilization. And some of the things that are embedded in the original Star Trek series are very interesting, because if you know the background on how that series was created, Gene Roddenberry was sitting in on these Council of Nine seances where they were basically communicating with Earthlings 350 years from now. Well, now that goes back to over 50 years, so that's Earthlings 300 years from now saying, this is you. There's no money used anymore. And you'll never see an episode in Star Trek where they're having to exchange money. They just say, chocolate shake, and it comes out. Okay, and other things that are put forth in Star Trek is the Prime Directive, that ET races are not allowed to adversely harm other evolving societies like ours. Well, then you'd say, well, what's up with the reptilians? What's up with the Greys? Well, they make the claim that they're indigenous and that they to have a right to do things on this planet, including abducting humans and doing their experiments. And the reptilians will go even further and say, look, we terraformed this planet. We put the species here. Of course we claim ownership. And so that's how they get around the Prime Directive. Let's go to the next one. And these abduction scenarios. And you can find a lot of images of the Greys, not only in early Christian texts, but also in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Look at that guy. Those big eyes. And even in the Egyptian legend of Zepi, or the first time, and they go really far back and they talk about the earliest sky gods coming down to earth, raised the land from mud and water, and flew through the air in their boats or their ships. Isn't it interesting that we call them flying ships? Because that's how you would early conceive what they are. We know what a ship is. Now it's flying. And they brought laws and wisdom to humans through a royal line of pharaohs. So even if you go into the most esoteric writings of the Egyptians, you'll also find that the ETs seeded us. Now these are the malevolent ETs. These are the ones we really don't want to have much to do with anymore, because they are very much in service to themselves. And that's why they're doing the abductions. That's why they're the top of the hierarchy. I often say in my interviews, it's somewhat ingenuous to blame it on the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. They're merely the captains and the colonels in this. The real generals is this Archon network, this what we would say the demons. And in many cases, the Greys were viewed as demons. Let's go to the next. So I mentioned to you that the Soviet Union had all this information that was just sold to the highest bidder. It's great because a lot of that is now on the internet. But they're also advancing the idea of, in this case, the Men in Black. And we're not talking about Will Smith shooting his little gun. Although I think it's funny that sometimes Hollywood will try to give you an alternative view of what that is. What he's talking about are these Barry Sonnenfeld's film called Men in Black. And who the Men in Black are? Well, I have a chapter in Future Esoteric. Could be humans, could be ETs. I think it's more likely that they're the hybrids. And these hybrids are telepathic. And one thing, a common denominator in most people who interact with the Men in Black is that they get inside your head. And they can talk to you. And they can make veiled threats. But they're not going to come out and say, I'll kill you if you talk about that. They'll put it in your head that there can be violence against you if you do. And Medvedev comes right out and says, yeah, there are ETs here on Earth among us, but they won't talk about it because it'll cause panic. So again, it's protecting the narrative, but this is information that is going to come out. Let's go to the next. And in the question of exopolitics, why are they here? What is their motive? Do they really want to see us evolve at this point? Or do they want to keep exploiting us? And we've heard in some of the presentations that there are well over 100 ET species who have an interest in this Earth. In that interview with Linda Moulton Howe and Corey Good, he said that some ET species don't care one bit about the human race. They're not here for that. They're here to collect like some exotic beetle in the Amazon jungle, and because in it is the DNA that they can use for something that they're working on. But that's also part of exopolitics, because any ET race that comes here, whether they're in contact with humans or not, has an agenda. And most of them, it's my understanding, are just here to observe. They're watching us. This is the greatest show in the universe. There's never really been anything quite like what we're going through right now, where humans are in this position where we can assert our free will and reclaim this surface world as our own for the first time without interference from some of these service to self ETs. Let's go to the next. And I end it with cryptozoology. And these are the cryptoid creatures. This was that film in the late 60s That's how it came out. And then some Japanese film forensic videologists cleaned it all up. Okay, now if this was a fake, and that's what we all saw, when they cleaned it up, and it looked like that. That detail was not known when this film came out. It was only known in the last couple of years. And who are these guys? Who are these cryptoids? What is this zoology all about? Well, if you know a bit about the Skinwalker Ranch, they're said to be able to transition right down. Sometimes they'll see like an opening, and they'll just pop right out and just go running off into the darkness of night. And you look into that opening, which could be a Stargate. Am I running out of time?
No.
Okay, just what time is it?
5 minutes.
Oh wow, let's keep going then. Sorry guys, because now we got to go into the utopia. Let's go to the next slide. This is a great crop circle, and I have a chapter on crop circles in the future.
I've been in that one.
Have you?
Yes.
In the Mill Hill?
Yes.
Okay, there's over 200 circles here.
Yes.
This is 2 football fields wide. Look, that's a person right there.
Wow.
So there was a guy who put up a bounty and said, anybody that can reproduce this with the swirling crops will give you 100,000 English pounds. That's like $130,000 in cash. This was 10 years ago. Nobody's been able to do it. Why? Because that appeared in the middle of the night during a rainstorm. He's not even saying you have to do it in the middle of the night during a rainstorm. He's just saying reproduce it. Let's go to the next. Yeah, and then objects on other planets. A lot of data. I have a chapter in here on structures on other planets. And this is actually from NASA. That's the photo. This is the deconstruction. A lot of stuff. Go to the next. As well as anomalies on the moon. Let's go to the next. We're almost done here. I want to get into the utopia section because this is a solution. This is our choices that we have in this modern life. Go to the next. We almost had a chance to ascend to the 5D a couple different times in history. The latest was during the time of the ancient Greeks. And Plato would say that to be a leader, to be a real governor, you have to be 50 years educated on top of the 20 years of your adolescence. So they really said in a future utopian civilization, we only really want the elder statesmen to make decisions because they're wise. That's the one good thing about getting older. You do become wiser. There is hope. Let's go to the next. Again, the great energy of the mind is the essence of life. Go to the next. Joseph showed this image. We both love it so much. As above, so below. The brain cell in the universe. Look at the parallels. Go to the next. And again, we are nature. Here's a river network in the Amazon, blood vessels in the human heart, and a close-up of a small leaf. Look at those comparisons. What we call imagination is actually the universal library of what's real. You couldn't imagine it if it weren't real somewhere, sometime. But usually it is. Let's go to the next. And Joseph also touched upon this, that we can only visually see this very small, narrow band of light. So there's all this other way from the ultraviolet to the infrared that we can't even see. And the same goes for what we can hear. We can only hear physically in a very narrow band, just like when you use a dog whistle. You can't hear it, but the dog can. So this is why I call the book, the subtitle, The Unseen Realms. Because there's so much that we can't perceive that's out there. Let's go to the next. And if we were to look at some of the experiments of Nikola Tesla, including his world system to give the world free energy, we wouldn't have to burn any fossil fuels. So we've been set back over a century with this technology. It's time to make a change. Let's go to the next. And let's start with just rebuilding his Wardenclyffe Tower. This is on Long Island. He was famously asked by J.P. Morgan, where's the meter? He said, there is no meter, it's free energy. They squashed him like a bug. Now, Nikola Tesla should be the Thomas Edison in our history books, but they wrote him out. That's why you don't hear about him. And because he was benevolent. He wanted to give his ideas away. Edison capitalized on them. Go to the next. Oh, I wish we could play this video, but we don't really have time. This is another example of a free energy pioneer who uses magnets to create a wheel spinning. And I could play this to you if you guys want to see it. It's really interesting. The point here is that many scientists like Floyd Sweet have come to the same conclusion and made the same inventions. It's like when a great idea comes, it comes to a lot of people at once. But of course, these guys are also squashed like a bug and not given their rightful place in history. It's good enough. Next one. Yeah, and then we got things like the Large Hadron Collider at the CERN facility. This could be used as a Stargate, perhaps, to open up other dimensions. As I said, we could have a whole talk on fourth dimensions and what that means. But we're running out of time, so let's go on. And yes, the end of money. As I mentioned in Star Trek, there's no mention of money. Consider what life would be like if we didn't have to hustle up every day. If it were an open society, if it was a meritocracy, we were talking about that last night. Hey, if you want to just play video games and not do anything, here's a dorm room and enough food, whatever you need, knock yourself out. If you want to do something in service to others and you do it long enough, we'll give you one of these houses here in Sedona for free. And when you die, we know we're not taking anything with us. It goes to the next person who is in service to others. So there are concepts being formed, and I do have a chapter called The End of Money. Let's go to the next. How we can do this. And of course, what really matters. This is taking us right back to the beginning. Focus on what matters. And that's love-based solutions. As dark as some of these subjects may seem, as long as you keep yourself of a higher vibration and not taking yourself down to the fear or anger, as much as some of this stuff pisses us off, we just can't let it get control of us. Let's go to the next. And blessed are the peacemakers. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. Isn't that true? Keep going, I think we're out of time here. We're not people having a spiritual experience, we are spirits having the human experience. We see this on bumper stickers, it's so true. Joseph talked about this as well. On to the next. Oh, there we go. We're moving along. And there we are. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you guys very much.